Chapter 11 of the Anarchist FAQ Editorial, Were the Makhnovists, Nationalists? Some books on the Makhnovist movement try to present the Makhnovists as being Ukrainian nationalists. A few discuss the matter in order perhaps to increase the respectability of the Makhnovist movement by associating it with more serious and respectable political theory than anarchism, namely nationalism. Those who seriously investigate the issue come to the same conclusion, namely that neither Makhno nor the Makhnovist movement was nationalist. See, for example, Frank Sisnet's essay Were the Makhnovists and the Ukrainian Revolution, which discusses this issue. Therefore, any claim that the Makhnovists were nationalists are incorrect. The Makhnovist movement was first and foremost an international movement of working people. This is to be expected, as anarchists have long argued that nationalism is a cross-class movement, which aims to maintain the existing class system but without foreign domination. See section D6 for details. As such, the Makhnovists were well aware that nationalism could not solve the social question and would simply replace a Russian ruling class and state with a Ukrainian one. This means that the aims of the Makhnovists went further than simply national liberation or self-determination. Anarchists, rather, aim for working-class self-liberation and self-determination, both as individuals and as groups, as well as politically, economically, and socially. To quote Makhno's wire to Lenin in December 1918, the Makhnovist aims are known and clear to all. They are fighting against the authority of all political governments and for liberty and independence of the working people. From this class and anti-hierarchical perspectives, it is not unsurprising that the Makhnovists were not nationalists. They did not seek Ukrainian independence, but rather working-class autonomy. This, of necessity, meant that they opposed all those who aimed to govern and/or exploit the working class, hence Arshinov. Composed of the poorest peasants who were unified by the fact that they all worked with their own hands, the Makhnovist movement was founded on the deep feeling of fraternity, which characterizes only the most oppressed. And during its entire history, it did not for an instant adhere to national sentiments. The whole struggle of the Makhnovists against the Bolsheviks was conducted solely in the name of the rights and interests of the workers. Denikin's troops, the Austro-Germans, Petalura, the French troops, and Berdyansk, Wrangel were all treated by the Makhnovists as enemies of the workers. Each one of these invasions represented for them essentially a threat to the workers, and the Makhnovists had no interest in the national flag under which they marched. He stressed that national prejudices had no place in the Makhnovshchina. There was also no place in the movement for religious prejudices. Among modern social movements, the Makhnovshchina was one of the few in which an individual had absolutely no interest in his or her neighbor's religion or nationality, in which he respected only the labor and the freedom of the worker. And the Makhnovists made their position on nationalism clear in the declaration published by the Revolutionary Military Council of the Army in October 1919. When speaking of Ukrainian independence, we do not mean national independence in Petalura's sense, but the social independence of workers and peasants. We declare that Ukrainian and all other workers have the right to self-determination, not as an independent nation, but as independent workers. In other words, the Makhnovists declared that, in their opinion, Petlurovshchina, the Petlura movement, Petlura being the leader of the nationalists, was a bourgeois nationalist movement whose road was entirely different from that of the revolutionary peasants, that the Ukraine should be organized on a basis of free labor and the independence of peasants and the workers, and that nothing but struggle was possible between the Makhnovshchina, the movement of the workers, and the Petlurovshchina, the movement of the bourgeoisie. This does not mean that anarchists are indifferent to cultural and national domination and oppression. Far from it. As we discussed in sections D6 and D7, anarchists are against foreign domination and cultural imperialism, believing that every community or national group has the right to be itself and develop as it sees fit. This means that anarchists seek to transform national liberation struggles into human liberation struggles, turning any struggle against foreign oppression and domination into a struggle against all forms of oppression and domination. This means that the Makhnovists, like anarchists in general, seek to encourage local culture and language while opposing nationalism. As Frank Sisson argues, it would be a mistake to label the Makhnovists as anti-Ukrainian, although they oppose the political goals of most Świadomi Ukraińcy, nationally conscious Ukrainians. They accepted the existence of a Ukrainian nation and used the terms Ukraine and Ukrainian, Mr. Makhno and the Russian Revolution. It should be noticed that opponents of Ukrainian independence generally call the south of Russia, or Little Russia. Thus, as opposition to nationalism did not imply a rejection or blindness to foreign domination and free cultural expression, on the question of the language to be taught in schools, the cultural education section of the Makhnovist insurgents army wrote the following in October 1998. The cultural education section of the Makhnovist army constantly receives questions from the school teachers asking about the language in which instruction should be given in the schools, now that Denikin streets have been expelled. The revolutionary insurgents, holding the principle of true socialism, cannot in any field or by any measure do violence to the natural desires and needs of the Ukrainian people. This is why the question of the language to be taught in schools cannot be solved by our army, but only be decided by the people themselves, by parents, teachers, and students. It goes without saying that the orders of Denikin's so-called Special Bureau, as well as General Mayaevsky Order No. 22, which forbid the use of the mother tongue in the schools, are null and void, having been forcibly imposed on the schools. In the interest of the greatest intellectual development of the people, the language of instruction should be that toward which the population naturally tends, and this is why the population, the students, the teachers, and the parents, and not authorities or the army, should freely and independently resolve this question. Quoted by Arsenal. They also printed a Ukrainian version of their paper, The Road to Freedom. Clearly, the opposition to Ukrainian nationalism did not mean that the Makhnovists were indifferent to imperialism and foreign political or cultural domination. This explains why Makhno criticized his enemies for anti-Ukrainian action and language. Michael Millay summarizes, for the Makhnovists, Ukrainian culture was welcome, while political nationalism was highly suspect. Given anarchist support for federal organization from below upwards, working class self-determination and autonomy, plus a healthy respect for local culture, it's easy to see why some historians have fostered a nationalist perspective onto the Makhnovists where none existed. This means that when they agitated with the slogan, all to whom freedom and independence are dear should stay in the Ukraine and fight the Denikinists, it should be noted that nowhere nationalism openly advocated in the line of argument put forward can be more easily interpreted as libertarian and, above all, anti-white. In 1921, Makhno wrote a review to the Soviet historians claimed that Makhno became a Ukrainian nationalist during the 1920-21 period. He totally dismissed the charges and argued that the historian distorted anarchism's espousal of local autonomy so as to create a trumped-up charge of nationalism. As Sisson argues, while Makhno never became a nationalist, he did to a degree become a Ukrainian anarchist. Thus, while neither Makhno nor the movement were nationalists, they were not blind to national and cultural oppression. They considered nationalism too narrow a goal to satisfy the social aspirations of the working classes. As Makhno argued in exile, the Ukrainian toilers had asserted their rights to use their own language and their entitlement to their own culture, which had been regarded for the revolution as an anathema. They also asserted their right to conform in their lives to their own way of life and specific customs. However, in the aim of building an independent Ukrainian state, certain statist gentlemen would dearly love to arrogate themselves all natural manifestations of Ukrainian reality. Yet the healthy instincts of the Ukrainian toilers and their baleful life under the Bolshevik yoke has not made them oblivious to the state danger in general, and so they shun the chauvinist trend and do not mix up with their social aspirations, rather seeking their road to emancipation, the struggle against the state and other essays. In summary, the Makhnovists were opposed to nationalism, but supported cultural diversity and self-determination within a free federation of toilers, communes, and councils. They did not limit their aims to national liberation, but rather sought the self-liberation of the working classes from every oppression, foreign or domestic, economic or political, cultural or social. Chapter 12. Did the Makhnovists support the whites? No, they did not. However, black propaganda by the Bolsheviks stated they did. Victor Sergei wrote about the strenuous calumnies put out by the Communist Party against him, which went as far to accuse him of signing pacts with the whites at the very moment when he was engaged in a life-and-death struggle against them. Memoirs of the Revolution. According to Arshinov, Soviet newspapers spread the false news of an alliance between Makhno and Wrangel in the summer of 1920. A representative of the Kharkov government declared at the plenary session of the Yekaterinslav Soviet that Soviet authorities had written proof of the alliance between Makhno and Wrangel. This was obviously an intentional lie. Wrangel, perhaps believing these lies had some basis, sent a messenger to Makhno in July 1920. Wrangel's messenger was immediately executed, and the entire incident was reported to the Makhnovist press. All this was perfectly clear to the Bolsheviks. They nevertheless continued to trumpet the alliance between Makhno and Wrangel. It was only after a military political agreement had been concluded between the Makhnovists and the Soviet power that the Soviet Commissariat of War announced that there had never been an alliance between Makhno and Wrangel, that earlier Soviet assertions to this effect were in error. Needless to say, while the Bolsheviks spread the rumor to discredit Makhno, the whites spread it to win the confidence of the peasants. Thus, when Trotsky stated that Wrangel had united with the Ukrainian partisan Makhno, he was aiding the efforts of Wrangel to learn from previous white mistakes and build some kind of popular base. By October, Trotsky had retracted the statement. Wrangel really tried to come into direct contact with Makhno's men and dispatched the Makhno's headquarters 2 representatives for negotiation. However, Makhno's men not only did not enter into negotiation with the representative Wrangel's, but publicly hanged them as soon as they arrived at the headquarters. Trotsky, of course, still tried to blacken the Makhnovists. In the same article, he argued that undoubtedly Makhno actually cooperated with Wrangel, and so with the Polish Szlachta, as he fought with them against the Red Army. However, there was no formal alliance between them. All the documents mentioning a formal alliance were fabricated by Wrangel. All this fabrication was made to deceive the protectors of Makhno, the French, and other imperialists. It is hard to know where to start in this amazing piece of political storytelling. As we discuss it in more detail in section 13, the Makhnovists were fighting the Red Army from January to September 1920 because the Bolsheviks had engineered their outlawing. As historian David Footman points out, the attempt by the Bolsheviks to transfer Makhno to the Polish front was done for political reasons. It is admitted on the Soviet side that this order was primarily dictated by the necessity of liquidating Makhnovshchina as an independent movement. Only when he was far removed from his home country would it be possible to counteract his influence. Indeed, it can be argued that by attacking Makhno in January, helped the whites to regroup under Wrangel and return later the year. Equally, it seems like a bad joke for Trotsky to blame the victim of Bolshevik intrigue for defending themselves. And the idea that Makhno had protectors in any imperialist nation is a joke, which only deserves laughter as a response. It should be noted that it is agreed that the initiative for joint action against Wrangel came from the Makhnovists. It was ignored by the Bolsheviks until after Wrangel started his big offensive in September 1920. So while the Bolsheviks claimed that the Makhnovists had made a pact with General Wrangel, the facts are that the Makhnovists fought the White with all their energy. Indeed, they considered the Whites so great a threat to the revolution they even agreed to pursue a pact with the Bolsheviks, who had betrayed them twice already and subjected both them and the peasantry to repression. As such, it could be argued that the Bolsheviks were the only counter-revolutionaries the Makhnovists can be accurately accused of collaborating with. Every historian who studied the moment has refuted the claims that the Makhnovist movement made an alliance with the counter-revolutionary white forces. For example, Michael Punich notes that Denikin was the main enemy that Makhno fought, stubbornly and uncompromising, from the end of 1918 to the end of 1990. Its social and anti-Ukrainian policies greatly antagonized all segments of Ukrainian society. The result of this was an increased resistance to the volunteer army and its regime, and a substantial strengthening of the Makhno movement. He also notes that after several months of hard fighting, Denikin's troops came to regard Makhno's army as their most formidable enemy. Makhno's conflict with Wrangel was equally as fierce. Although Makhno had trouble with both the Bolsheviks and Wrangel, his contributions to the final defeat of the latter was essential, as it proved by the effort on both sides to have him as an ally. According to Footman, Makhno remained to the end the implacable enemy of the Whites. Malat just states the obvious: the Makhnovists were totally opposed to the Whites. And we will leave the last word to the considered judgment of the White General Denikin, who, in exile, stated that the Makhno movement was the most antagonistic to the idea of the White movement. In summary, the Makhnovists fought the White counter-revolution with all in their might, playing a key role in the struggle and defeat of both Denikin and Wrangel. Anyone who claims they worked with the Whites is either ignorant or a liar.